She was wearing a pale pink blazer and holding a glass of champagne when she looked me in the eye and said, "Oh, we didn't think you were coming." I'd driven 40 minutes to get there. I was wearing the dress I'd been saving since Christmas, and my son was standing right beside her, not saying a single word. That was the night I understood, finally and completely, that I had been mistaken about a great many things. My name is not on the invitation list. That's what she'd said, actually. 2 minutes earlier to the young woman at the check-in table. I don't see her on the list. Let me check. But she wasn't checking. She was making a point. She was doing it slowly, deliberately, in front of 3 other guests who were waiting behind me in their cocktail dresses and suit jackets. And she was enjoying it. I could tell by the way she tilted her head. My daughter-in-law has always tilted her head when she's enjoying something she shouldn't be. Her name is Serena. My son's name is Marcus. They'd been married 4 years at that point, and this was the rehearsal dinner for their vow renewal ceremony. A party I had written a check for, a large one, $40,000, which was most of what I had left from selling the house in Dayton, where I'd raised Marcus alone after his father left us in 1987. I want you to understand what that money meant. I was 67 years old. I worked 31 years as a registered nurse. I never remarried. I drove a 2009 Honda Accord with a cracked dashboard, and I clipped coupons on Sunday mornings because that was the only luxury I allowed myself. Coffee, the newspaper, and a little quiet. I had built that savings account dollar by dollar, year by year, telling myself it was for emergencies. But when Marcus called me last spring and said Serena wanted to renew their vows for their 5th anniversary, wanted something beautiful, something she could remember forever, and that they were a little short, I didn't hesitate. I should have, but I didn't. I'd been trying to buy my way into that marriage for 4 years. I can say that now. I couldn't say it then. I told myself I was being generous, being supportive, being the kind of mother who showed up. But the truth is, I was scared. Serena had made it very clear, very early, that she and Marcus were a unit and I was a visitor in that unit. She didn't say it outright. She was too smart for that. She said things like, "We just need some space to build our own traditions. And Marcus and I have talked about it and we feel like boundaries are healthy." She said these things with a pleasant expression and a therapist's vocabulary, and I always walked away feeling like I had done something wrong without knowing what it was. So I gave them money when they asked. I watched their dog when they traveled. I sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts and never showed up uninvited. I followed every rule she set. And then she left me off the list. They'd been planning the vow renewal for 5 months. I knew the venue, the Ashford Estate out in Westchester County, a renovated 1920s mansion with ivy on the walls and a garden that held 200 people. I had seen the photos. I had approved the florist because Serena asked me to approve the florist, and I had been so grateful to be consulted that I'd spent 2 evenings comparing peonies and garden roses. I had bought my dress. I had told my friend Constance about it, at least a dozen times. How beautiful it was going to be. How I hoped Marcus and I might finally have a real conversation. How maybe things were turning around. I arrived at the Ashford Estate at 6:45 on a Friday evening in September. The sky was the color of peaches. The parking attendant smiled at me. I walked through the main doors feeling, I'll admit, a little hopeful. The check-in table was set up just inside the foyer. 2 young women in black dresses with a leather-bound guest book and a printed list on a clipboard. I gave my name. The girl looked down. She looked again. She glanced up at me with that particular expression, not unkind, just careful, and said, "I'm so sorry, I don't see you here. Could you just give me 1 moment?" She turned to find someone, and that someone turned out to be Serena. Serena came around the corner holding her champagne, and she looked at me and her face did a thing I will never forget. It smiled, not warmly, just precisely. The way you smile when a plan is going exactly as you intended. "Oh," she said, "we didn't think you were coming." "I told Marcus I'd be here at 7, I said. "Right." She tilted her head. "I think there may have been some miscommunication. The list was finalized weeks ago. We had a seating capacity issue." She said it gently, like she was explaining something to a child. "But you're here now, so." She made a small gesture with her champagne glass, vaguely toward the door, vaguely toward the party, vaguely toward nowhere in particular. Marcus was 6 feet away. I looked at him. He looked at his shoes. That was the part that broke something in me. Not the list. Not Serena. My son, looking at his shoes. I had held that boy when he had night terrors at age 5. I had sat in the hospital waiting room for 7 hours when he broke his arm at 12, and the surgery took longer than expected. I had worked double shifts for 3 years, so he could go to the college he wanted, not the one that gave him the scholarship. I had never once asked him to choose between me and anyone else. I had bent myself into shapes I didn't know I could make just to fit into the corner of his life that Serena had decided I was allowed. And he was looking at his shoes. I stood there for what felt like a long time but was probably 30 seconds. Then I said, "Of course, I'm sorry for the confusion." I picked up my purse. I walked back out through the main doors. The parking attendant brought my car around. I sat in the driver's seat for a while before I started the engine. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I'd expected to cry. Instead, I felt something quieter and heavier, like a decision settling into place. I drove home. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table until almost midnight, and I thought about $40,000. I thought about the florist I'd spent 2 evenings researching. I thought about Serena's face, the precision of it, the champagne glass held just so. I thought about Marcus and his shoes. And then I thought, I am 67 years old. I have maybe 20 good years left if I'm lucky, and I have spent the last 4 of them folding myself up small enough to fit through a door that was never going to open all the way. I slept. In the morning, I called my bank. I had written that $40,000 check 6 weeks prior and it had cleared, but I had also set up recurring payments on behalf of the event. The catering deposit installments, the floral balance, the AV company, the rentals. Because Serena had asked me to manage the vendor payments directly. She'd said it would be simpler. I had access to the payment portal. My credit card was on file. I removed my credit card from the portal. I called the catering company and canceled my payment authorization. I called the florist. I called the AV rental company. I called the transportation service, the vintage car company Serena had booked to drive the 2 of them from the venue to the hotel, and I canceled that too. I was polite on every call. I explained that I was no longer authorizing payments on behalf of the event, and that the event organizers would need to make their own arrangements. I want to be clear, I did not cancel the vendors. I did not sabotage anything. I simply removed myself from the financial arrangement, which was something I should have done the moment she left me off the guest list. The calls started coming into Serena by Saturday afternoon. I know this because Marcus called me at 4 o'clock. His voice was tight in a way I recognized from when he was a teenager and had done something he knew was wrong. "Mom, what did you do?" "I removed my payment authorization," I said. "The vendors will need to be paid by whoever is hosting the event. The Vow Renewal is in 3 weeks. "I know. Some of those balances are. Mom, the catering balance alone is." "I know what the balances are, Marcus. I set up the payments." Silence. Then, "Why would you do this?" I thought about saying many things. I thought about saying, "Because your wife left me off the guest list of an event I paid for, and looked me in the face while she did it, and you looked at your shoes." I thought about saying, "Because I have given you everything I have, and I have gotten a corner and an apology that never came." I thought about saying, "Because I am 67 years old, and I am tired." Instead, I said, "I think you know why, Marcus." He hung up. Serena called an hour later. Her voice was different on the phone, sharper, the pleasant therapist vocabulary gone. "Do you understand what you're doing? Do you understand how much this disrupts?" "Serena," I said, "I was left off the guest list of an event I funded. I think you can understand why I'm no longer comfortable managing the vendor payments." She started to say something about how it was a capacity issue, about miscommunication, about how he was being... "I wish you both well," I said. "I really do." And I hung up. They found the money? I don't know how. I assume Marcus's in-laws contributed, or they took out a short-term loan, or Serena called in favors. The vow renewal happened. I know because my friend Constance saw photos on social media. The peonies looked beautiful. I had picked good peonies. What happened after that was quieter. Marcus didn't call for 6 weeks. When he did, it was a stilted conversation, careful on both sides, neither of us saying the real thing. Serena sent me an email. 1 paragraph, formal, something about moving forward and establishing clearer expectations. I read it twice and filed it away. I didn't respond. I want to tell you what I did instead, because this is the part that matters. 2 weeks after the rehearsal dinner, I put my condo on the market. I had been living in a two-bedroom unit in White Plains for 11 years, partly because it was a 40-minute drive from Marcus and Serena's house in Westchester. I had told myself that proximity was important, that being close meant being available, that if I was just available enough, present enough, useful enough, things would be different. My condo sold in 9 days. I moved to a small house in Asheville, North Carolina. I had visited once 10 years ago with a friend, and I had thought then, someday I will live somewhere with mountains and a front porch, and people who don't rush past each other in parking lots. I had filed that thought away like I filed away so many things. The house has a garden. I don't know much about gardening, but I'm learning. My neighbor, a retired school teacher named Willa, comes over on Tuesday mornings and we drink coffee and she teaches me what she knows about roses. I have a porch. I sit on it in the evenings. I joined a watercolor class at the Community Arts Center. I am not good at it. I go anyway. I sleep through the night now, which I hadn't done in years. Years of half sleeping, half waiting for something. I could never have said what. Marcus called me in February. It was a different kind of call. Shorter and more honest. He said he'd been thinking. He said some things had been hard between him and Serena. He said he was sorry, not for any specific thing, or maybe for all of it. I'm not sure. His voice cracked a little on the word sorry, and I recognized that voice. That crack, from when he was 9 years old and had broken my grandmother's china teacup and came to me holding the pieces. I told him I loved him. I told him I was not going anywhere. I told him that I hoped he was being honest with himself about what he wanted his life to look like. Not what Serena wanted, not what I wanted, but what he wanted. He said, I don't know yet. I said, that's okay, you can figure that out. We talk on Sunday evenings now. It's not everything, but it's real, which is something I hadn't had with him in a long time. His daughter, his and Serena's daughter, my granddaughter, Piper, who is 7 years old and has his same stubborn chin and thinks frogs are fascinating. She has my phone number in her tablet now. She calls me sometimes on Saturday mornings to tell me about the frogs she has seen. I listen to every word. I tell her about the frogs in my garden. Last month, I sent her a field guide to amphibians in the eastern United States, and she called me immediately, voice bright as anything, to read me the first 3 pages. I cannot buy her love, and I'm not trying to. What I'm giving her is just time, attention, a grandmother who picks up the phone. I think about that evening at the Ashford estate sometimes. The peach-colored sky, the young woman at the check-in table with her careful expression, Serena and her champagne glass and her precisely tilted head, my son and his shoes. I think about who I was in that parking lot, sitting in my car before I started the engine. 67 years old and my Christmas dress, trying to understand what I had done wrong. I hadn't done anything wrong. That was the thing. I had just believed for too long that love was something you earned by making yourself small enough to be convenient. You don't earn it that way. You can't. I know that now. My porch faces west. On clear evenings, the light comes in low and gold across the garden, and it stays that way for a long time before the dark comes. I sit there with my coffee, and I don't rush it. I have learned, finally, not to rush it. I'm 68 now. I have time. And for the first time in longer than I can remember, it feels like it belongs to me. I keep coming back to that parking lot, the peach-colored sky, the engine off, my hands still on the wheel, 67 years old in my Christmas dress, trying to figure out what I had done wrong. Nothing. I had done nothing wrong, and somehow that was the hardest thing to accept. Not that I had been treated badly, but that I had allowed it for so long because I believed I had to earn my place, that if I was quiet enough, generous enough, useful enough, eventually the door would open all the way. It never does. Not that door. A door that only opens when you're carrying something doesn't open for you. It opens for what you're holding. What I've come to understand is that what happened between me and Serena didn't begin at the Ashford estate. It began every time I wrote a check instead of saying what I actually felt. Every time I accepted an arrangement that diminished me because I was afraid of what saying no might cost. The cause was long and quiet. The effect was a clipboard and a tilted head and my son looking at his shoes. That's how these things work. Not with one dramatic moment, but with 100 small surrenders you don't notice until you're standing in a foyer and the whole accumulated weight of them lands on you at once. What I had to relearn. And I use that word deliberately, relearn. Because I knew it once and forgot it somewhere in the business of raising a child alone and working 31 years of hospital shifts, is that character is not what you give. It's what you refuse to give away. I gave Serena my money willingly. What I gave away without noticing was my sense of what I was worth. Those are not the same transaction, and I confused them for 4 years. The morning I called the vendors, I wasn't being cruel. I was being honest. I was saying, I participated in this, and I am withdrawing my participation. That distinction mattered to me then, and it still does. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I wanted to stop hurting myself. And the clarity it took to do that, to see the situation plainly, without the fog of hoping things would improve on their own, that didn't come from anger. It came from a very long, very quiet night at my kitchen table. From asking myself one question: if I keep doing this, what does the next 10 years look like? I saw the answer clearly, and I didn't want it. Marcus said he was sorry in February, and I believed him. Not because I needed the apology to move forward, but because I could hear in his voice that he was telling the truth. He is still figuring things out. He's in his 40s, and he is learning something that some people learn at 20, and some people learn at 70, and some people, honestly, never learn at all. That the people who love you most are not the ones who ask the least of themselves on your behalf. Piper calls me on Saturday mornings. She told me last week that she found a green tree frog behind the shed and she named it Gerald. I told her that was an excellent name for a frog. She laughed and it sounded like something being restored. I'm 68. I have a porch and a garden and Tuesday mornings with Willa and a watercolor class where I am genuinely, cheerfully terrible. I have time that belongs to me. That is not a small thing. That is everything.